about this business of working with community, which I think has been a theme which has run through several of the discussions that we've been having this afternoon. There was a lot about the business of sustainability. How do we support groups? This, of course, is speaking very much from the point of view of, if you like, public responsibility or having an agency role. So how do we support these groups that we're launching out into this brave world of being more empowered and management? And there was I can't resist it really, there was a slight sense of sort of, dare I say it, edginess, but worry about this. And it wasn't said, but I have to say I was thinking it, and that is, well, yes, of course there's a bit of risk involved here, but never mind, you know, okay, maybe one or two of our treasured projects fail, and what's failure actually? What do we mean by failure in this sense? But for God's sake, it's worth the risk, isn't it? Just to go over the edge and have a try. And I think that sense of being prepared to push the boat out. And you could say that a lot of what's been happening here in Neroche is perhaps an example of that, as I understand it. And we need to be thinking more in that way, is the feeling I'm picking up behind a lot of the discussions we've been having about involving people in managing woodland and managing places.
Definitions of community would seem to be as diverse as the services that a tree provides. And therefore, the big issue was go out and find out who your community is. Interestingly, we discovered that sometimes that community is invisible. There is nobody living in Embercombe when Mac arrives there, but his mailing list now has 800 names on it. There was a community and they were big trouble at times to him and his project. Sometimes they're unheard. There seem to be a lot of women in that group. And I wrote, but not the eunuchs. And now I have to say, but maybe the eunuchs after that last presentation as well. Community engagement requires us to go find these communities and then devolve real power to them to shape the detail of our projects. There was a strong undercurrent that this has to be a totally equal relationship.
We quickly and commonly came to the conclusion that people networks are at the heart of ecological networks, and to get people networks we've got to be braver and more respectful and more open about our dialogue and our creating the space to do our conservation through and with people, and to stop trying to be experts or to keep our field narrow. So that's dialogue, listening, talking, getting that whole discussion going.
I kind of worry that somehow we present a rather naive face, that just because we're starting at a different place, we'll get better outcomes. And I'll be deeply frustrated, I suppose, if I leave tomorrow thinking the only message is about community engagement. I think we knew that 30 years ago. You know, it's a kind of old message.
It's not rocket science. The trick is so much about respecting people on a level, on their own terms, it seems to me. And it seems always the mistake that we make is that we put ourselves above the common herd somehow because we think that we know better. And most environmental projects that seek involvement from the general public tend to do so from a platform of saying, we know the way to the promised land, hey, come and join us.
There's an awful lot of language going on about engaging people, and effectively it's actually about using people. It's about using communities to do what we actually already decided needed to be done, and then convincing them they need to be following us to do it. And it's awfully disrespectful, actually. So it has the face of community engagement, but actually it's kind of very utilitarian and using people. And I think we have to be really careful. I mean, I do agree about taking risks with projects, but what's being risked? And some projects, if it's the risk that the project to manage the wood collapses, that's one risk. But if it's a risk that you've built up a sense of community and then you walk away with your funding and your resources and the community is left high and dry, actually you're doing damage to that community, not actually helping them in the long term. So I think this business that respect for people should underpin everything that is done and not be either using them or exploiting them or marching into communities and trying to make things happen in a very disrespectful way.
There's no point just retrenching into a touchy-feely language and an expression of what we do, because that's not going to bring a better world for us at all. We've got to find ways of explaining this collaboration, the unique roles that each has to play, where the funding is going to come from, and seriously talk about sustainable, economically sustainable approaches to managing woodlands that matter to people. That's the real challenge.
If you're going to appreciate any landscape history and story, and the Neroche project has been a brilliant one to show what can happen with 2 or 3 years when you get someone in post to do that, to do the story. But you then raise expectations, you wind up the community, they're all ready for action, they're all ready to go, and then suddenly the money runs out. Who's going to sort it out? Where does the S word come in? Sustainability for heritage. Got to be in there somewhere, otherwise all that we've created with this project, who's going to be left? The threatened times of us chaps and chapesses who are in local authorities, or anybody in this room who's funded out of local funding, where is the money going to come from to provide that sustainability? We've seen some good initiatives perhaps going on, you know, CICs, social enterprise, all those opportunities. How many of those can we fit into our sector? Is there a saturation point? Can we have 200, 500? What happens? I don't quite know, but I think there's opportunities there for heritage to build into that.
Where are you? Professional, personal? What tribe are you? What hat have you got on now as we're having these discussions? Because it's interesting to hear in this debate, are you entrenching in your position? Or are you flexing? Are you listening to what other people are saying and kind of going, ooh, that's interesting, I might walk over here and have a little bit of what's being said? Or are you kind of going, actually, no, that's where I'm sitting? Because I'm hearing quite a lot of interesting things being said, and we're getting to be halfway through. So this evening we're at a point where we're in a state of flux as far as change is concerned. We want you to have changed a little bit by the end of this conference. So my challenge to you now, and particularly as you listen to Eric's story later, is to see where you are in your thinking. Can you flex a bit? Can you move? Can you change?
We're going through challenging times. But I think for me this event has renewed my enthusiasm to keep fighting the bureaucracy, the OGB 39 and the various other amazing documents that come down from various places, which actually can act as a barrier that stop us from taking a more creative approach to managing our woodlands. I think we are a time of opportunity, and I hope I can build on what we've learned from Neroche to develop frameworks that work for community empowerment, but also to be prepared to take a risk on things that aren't going to work.
I need to have more confidence in what my gut reactions are to how I do my work. I am essentially a fundraiser, and there are ways that I fundraise. We are told what to fundraise for and how, and it doesn't come from the community, and it doesn't make sustainable fundraising, and it doesn't create exciting and long-lasting projects. But until we start putting that message out, we're not going to be able to turn that round.
Yeah, I've been really encouraged because I was flagging a little bit in the broader kind of global picture. And so I've made a pledge to myself to get more involved locally. And also Eric being here, you know, we're part of this kind of over 60s club in a way, inspired me because he's still working full on and he's got no intention of retiring. And that image of the golden plovers and how they get from Alaska to Hawaii by swapping the leadership a little bit, you know, and that we can get there together. So that's what I'm taking away. We can get there together.